So the Packard Proving Grounds, of course, you're very familiar with that because that's where we're sitting today. And that's where he started. He had the plant downtown, the Packard Proving Grounds out here, and really crafted those wonderful machines called the Packard cars. The Packard Proving Grounds has multiple Albert Kahn facilities, the lodge, the house, this building, the Proving Grounds. Several buildings on this site was designed by Albert Kahn. But today we're going to talk a little bit about more how he went out into different places. And so he created 40 sales and service buildings worldwide. Albert Kahn and Packard together did 40. Packard did even more than 40. There's a whole host of them. But we're going to talk about some of them. But before we begin, we're going to talk a little bit about Henry Joy. So Henry Joy, he was a great partner with Albert Kahn, a client and a collaborator. Mr. Joy called him the human steam engine because he was constantly doing more projects. He started with relationships with the in-laws, the Newberries. He did alterations to the residence. He worked with William Metzger in partnership with Henry Joy for the automotive sales building, built in 1902, expanded in 1903. He recommended Mason and Kahn for the U of M new engineering building in 1902. And that was where they were first using that truss bar system. And so he was there with Albert as they were inventing and creating and supporting the reinforced concrete, the truss bar. And then he hired Albert and Julius to design the Packard factory, which of course is still downtown. There's only a couple buildings left, and we'll hear a little bit more about that. His Grosse Pointe residence, Fair Acres, in 1908, the Detroit Athletic Club in 1913, and Garage in 1915. So Henry Joy and Albert Kahn had this very long relationship together, and that's very exciting. Henry B. Joy's automotive sales building in 1902. This is showing a picture of it. It was originally one of the first automotive sales and service buildings or sales buildings, and it's showing that it's got the drawings and the original structure. William Metzger's dealership, again, remember I just mentioned that William Metzger and Joy were closely related. He had the first dedicated dealership building in Detroit, and maybe in the United States. And who was William Metzger? He was a bicycle enthusiast. He opened the first independent U.S. dealership. And he organized the first Detroit Auto Show. So he was very instrumental in those early years in the automotives in the Detroit area. He organized the first famous sweepstakes race that was won by Henry Ford. So he was very much involved in promoting automotives. As a sales manager, he sold 2,700 Model A Cadillacs in New York Auto Show, and formed the EMF to build cars for sale through Studebaker's Carriage Dealers Network. Studebaker eventually absorbed the EMF organization. So he's a pretty important guy, and he had this facility, first dedicated dealership. It is currently the home of the DeMichelle, I've slaughtered that name, the auction on the northeast corner of Jefferson and Brush. And so you can see the Albert Kahn building, and I love to look at the detail along the top, and when you look at the drawings, it's all there, and you look at the building, and it's all there. And so it's fun to unroll these buildings, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. This was done in 1903, and then the building shows there is where it was in 1940. He also did the sales office at the Packard plant, and that's originally located in the second floor of the administration building, which is building number 13. And it was later moved to building 86, but you can see these 1923 Packard, the 1940, that was all part of that administration building, which I believe is your administration building, right? It's still, I'm pointing back there to our Orrin Oldenburg. Raise your hand. So he's working on something out there that you might want to talk to him about. Additional Detroit sales and service buildings were designed by Albert Kahn at Jefferson and San Antoine. The Packard purchased a vacant Academy of Sacred Heart School in 1916. And the plan was to build this 10-story sales and service building in its place as a gift to the city of Detroit. And it was going to be not only a sales and service, but also have a large auditorium so they could have the grand opera performances, and public use could be used in this building, which is kind of cool. It's like, really? They're going to do a auditorium and a sales and service? It's kind of was, how do we invest in our city and, the arts and stuff like that? So that was kind of cool. Unfortunately, it was never built. In 1917, a 3-story sales and service building was designed on the site also, and that wasn't built either because of World War I. And, all of a sudden the attention went away into World War I. And then they turned the Academy of Sacred Heart building over to the Red Cross because they needed it for the war efforts. However, the Detroit branch service building at 574 Woodbridge at San Antone was built only 1 block south of that Academy of Sacred Heart in 1919. So the vision didn't go away, it just kept changing. And this shows where that building was. These are some of the pictures of that original building. And also one of the sedans. It's kind of cool, right outside that. In the Detroit branch, in this shows an image of the building that was added. It was right next to it, and that was your entrance to the sales and service. And one end has the entrance, and the other end had the exit, and it's just really cool to see that building in the drawings. And it's like, wait a minute, this is this picture and this drawing, and it's very fascinating to connect the two pieces together. This is the Detroit branch service building, and you can see the building, and then off to the far right, you can see that entrance and what it looked like inside that little wing, and there's all the cars lined up, the glass ceiling in there, and that certainly aligns with the drawings and designed by Albert Kahn. Then moving to another facility, the Detroit branch of the sales building, 574 Jefferson. This was a really interesting where they, if you look in the far background, you can see the building I just showed you. And so this was pulling out that sales and service into its own identity. This was the look that they gave many of the sales and service, the sales, as they were opening these in other parts of the country. It used some of the characteristics of that original building in other locations. And so this 2-story structure was completed in 1924. Unfortunately, it was demolished when the Jefferson Ave was expanded. But you can see the detailed drawings, that colonnade at the top of the structure, the nice big windows, and then to get a feel of what that looked like inside the showroom, it was very fancy chandeliers, nice ceilings that had plaster moldings and plaster detail. It was definitely a different showroom than some of the existing wooden, or the buildings that were sales and service. It upped that scale quite a bit. And those pictures were taken in 1925. And as you can see here, it's a reflected ceiling plan, and it shows the detail of that ceiling. And so the drawings showed that kind of detail, and it was actually incorporated into the buildings. Going to another location is the Woodward Avenue branch sales building, 8500 Woodward at Philadelphia. And this was built in 1924, and you can see some of the same feelings of that last one, but maybe scaled down just a little bit. It was built in 1924, and it had an addition that was put on it at Woodward Avenue and Branch Service Building, put this addition on that. Now, since then, the original building has been torn down, but this part of the addition has been turned into 38 modern apartments in 2020. So it's exciting to see what was part of the sales and service has been converted into other uses. And we're going to show you some other examples of how those buildings have been converted over the years, and they're still around as well. The Woodward Branch Service Building, it's very fascinating because this is the first time that they started using internal ramps. And you can see these ramps. Before the cars were moved up and down an elevator, and this way, this was the first time they've navigated the ramps in buildings. By the mid-1920s, ramps had been installed in Kahn's design service building. And so it was that conversion from, okay, we just have to move them up, to that ramp. There's some fascinating ramps in some of the buildings too. Then moving farther up Jefferson, the Grosse Pointe Branch Library, again, you can see some of the same characteristics that you saw in some of the other ones. This was a single-story structure completed in 1929. Unfortunately, it was demolished in 1997, and townhouses have been built on that site. But that was what it looked like the last time it before it was up for sale. Now we're going to move into New York City, and so Detroit was producing Packards, but we needed to get those out into the other parts of the world. And New York City, of course, was a hot spot it's a booming city. People appreciated the Packards. So we're going to cover some of the facilities there in New York. So there were 6 locations in New York City, or New York and Gotham. 1907, there was a sales and export building on Broadway at 61st Street, which was near the New York Central 60th Street Railroad. You'll notice most of these were near the railroads. The supplies, the cars had to get there, and so all the parts and vehicles were transported by the railroads. And so it's fascinating when you look at some of the old construction photos. There's like not much around. They're like fields, not like you would see New York City today. And so it was some of the earliest things that were going into those areas. In 1909, there was an 8-story service station in Queens Avenue in Long Island, which again was near the Pennsylvania Railroad and Sunnyside Railroad. There was a large addition built in 1916 and renovated into a logistics center over the years. In 1911, the service building at 1050 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, it's currently unrecognizable as an Albert Kahn building because it is a Cube Smart self-storage unfortunately. It's hard to see the original stuff until we look at the drawings. In 1929, the service station at 4650 Broadway at Sherman Avenue was recently demolished, and a 20-story mixed-use tower is being built on the site. And 1926, the service station at 696 East Fordham Road in the Bronx has been refaced, and it's a DMV office building. In 1926, the 8-story service building at 787 11th Avenue, near New York Central 60th Street Railroad is there. So and it's recently renovated to a mixed use. So we're gonna cover a few of these just to kind of give you a flavor for what this looks like. So this was the Packard Motor Car in New York, Broadway at 61st Street. Really cool, iconic looking front of that building. Love the way that the drawings and the architecture fit together. It was originally a terracotta exterior finish with a lot of really cool details on it. This was the Broadway at 61st Street proposed 1926 5-story addition that was never built. Again, you see those ramps. On the far right, you see a little high where the existing building was, and so this was the back half of that they were looking to do. And it was supposed to be a 5-story addition off the back, and you can see all the ramps. And we don't know exactly, but John and I were thinking, there might have been some storage of some of the old Packards because you didn't really drive the cars in the wintertime because of the snow and stuff like that. We don't know for sure. We also highly suspect that cars were assembled there, so they may have come in on the railroads in parts and pieces, and then they had to have their final assembly and then roll out to the streets from there. So this is the Packard Motor Car that was on the Queens Boulevard in Long Island. And you can see, again, it's a multi-story building, really cool entrance and entrance doors. And so they did want a presence. They wanted people to know this is the place of the Packard, and beautiful entrances. And you can see that building under construction. They originally had the original building, and then they added on, it's kind of turned sideways, and added on and added down in 1916. So obviously the Packards were booming in New York. And this is what it looked like on the inside. Very open spaces, had the concrete columns, very similar to what you see in some of the other areas of Albert Kahn design stuff in that era. Big windows. This is what the building looks like today. And so it's exciting to see that beautiful original building. It's been renovated for multiple tenants. Last mile logistics center, flexible manufacturing, office space, lab space. So an Albert Kahn building can be used for all kinds of really cool things, still relevant today because of the wide open spaces. Has the oversized windows for abundant natural light, has skyline views, freight elevators, and really heavy floor loads. So those buildings can be used for manufacturing. They could be used for anything. But it's exciting to see that this building is certainly still being marketed today. Moving on, there's the 787 11th Avenue at 55th Street. This 8-story service building was built in 1928. Original design was for 3 stories, and it was originally the Packard buildings on Broadway was only blocks away. And this may have been built instead of expanding that original building that they were proposing extensions to. The tracks ran down 11th Avenue, so parts and cars could be brought right into this facility. And this had some really unique circular ramps, and this shows what the circular ramp looks like, but you can see from the drawing how open floor plan, it could be anything. And so certainly a marketable piece of property today. This is 787 11th Avenue. It's a 10-story mixed-use building. And it's really cool because it's actually still a Jaguar and Land Rover dealership. But it's also Mount Sinai School of Medicine, Biotech Campus. And so it's being used for dealerships and other things. And so it's exciting to see reuses of the existing building. Now we're going to move into some Alvin T. Fuller, New England's Packard dealerships, and he was a pretty significant guy. He started as a bicycle racer, shop owner, and he imported the first automobiles into Boston. And so he acquired the Packard franchise in 1903, and he opened and designed a 4-story building in the Commonwealth Avenue. He had dealerships in, I'm going to say this wrong, Worcestershire? Help me out. Worcester. See, I knew I was going to screw it up. And Providence. He also represented Cadillac in Boston, and he's the guy that started the first Washington birthday open houses. You know, it was about the time people are getting their cars out of the storage for the year, and you know, it's time to buy those new cars and stuff like that. And so he's the one that started that. He was also one of the most successful car dealers in the 1920s and became the governor of Massachusetts. So Fuller, he had other facilities, and Albert Kahn had designed for him. So this was the Alvin T. Fuller in Boston. It started out as the building on the left, and then it added more of the service. Could have been storage. Again, we don't exactly know. Could have been assembly. We don't exactly know. That would be something that would be very fun for some of you to help us research. And this is showing the storage, or excuse me, the service end in the 1916, and then they expanded the showroom and stuff like that on the left side. This is one of the Boston facilities that they added onto, and you can see it on the right-hand side those columns that you often see in an Albert Kahn building, and that wide open space. It is now luxury apartments that sell for between $2,200 to $5,500 per month in some of those apartments. And so it's exciting to see what was once car into luxury apartments. Also going into the Packard service building in Philadelphia. This is another beautiful, tall sales and service. Again, it's the service on the bottom, and then sales on the bottom, and then service as you go up. This was kind of cool because it was an 8-story, 21,780 square foot original building, limestone, terracotta, with the 8-story expansion in 1916. Beautiful 2-story showroom. Vehicles were reported as assembled there. Again, that's one of those come in on the trains, probably do the final assembly there and have them ready for the road. The building was, Packard left this in 1920s, and the Philadelphia Record was published here for quite a few years, and then the building was neglected, and then in 1986 it was renovated into apartments. And it's listed on the National Register for Historic Places. So this is what it looks like today. So if you look at this lower picture, you can see the wood paneling in the balcony that was part of that original showroom. So it's right there. It's a beautiful building, and it's apartments now. This is another building built in 1926. In this one, Albert Kahn built the outside of the building, and so we were not the architect of record on the inside. By 1926, there was a lot of projects going on in Albert Kahn's portfolio at the time. But the exterior is still pretty much intact, and the Temple University Kornberg School of Dentistry has occupied that building since 1946. And so it's still in use in Philadelphia. And here's another one that's still in use, and this is in Cleveland. So if you recognize that gallery along the top, the showroom, what they were looking like at the time, just like the Detroit ones, that's what it looked like in Cleveland, and it's now part of Cleveland Clinic's laboratory medicine building. So they did a lot of renovations to it, so it doesn't look quite as cool as it once did, but it's still being in use. This is a fun one in Buffalo. You can see it was built as the single story, and they added in a floor above that, and you can see the steps of progression, and so it has remained, it was built in 1926, excuse me, the third floor was added, and it has remained a dealership until 1958 as a Packard dealership in Buffalo. That building also is now 40 apartments. However, it ranges in price from $342 to $976 a month. A little bit different than the other one, but it is listed on the National Register for Historic Places, and it has beautiful details of Packard still on that building, and so it's kind of a fun one to look at how that has been restored over time. This is another one that is kind of fascinating, has a little story to it. It was the Leonard Williams and Company, and it was in England. So it was built in 1926 with an addition in 1936. And Packards were shipped from Canada over there and reassembled. And currently the site is now a retail center. However, it also was that London location to be able to start distributing these Packards across England. In 1937, as part of the motor show, shows the ad. The blueprint, I don't know if you can read it, it's got some writing that says, keep this because the originals have been sent to London. And so that's all we have for drawings. However, this facility was making the Packard marine engines for torpedo boats, and so it got bombed during the Battle of Britain. It was hit again by the V-2 rocket in March of 1945, killing 32 and 100 seriously wounded, but the building was rebuilt and then remained a dealership until the 1960s. So this is another interesting one. It's in Pittsburgh. It's a service building. The original building was built on the site. Looking at the construction photos, you can see the grade of which, I mean, they had to use a whole lot of fill to get that building up and flat. But then they put an addition on it. This is a floor plan of the original building and then the addition planned, and you just saw how steep that grade was. And it's very interesting to see how this building on the far right is actually up on stilts and suspended in lower level. But you can see how wide open that space was. So again, it could be used for anything. And today, it is actually a Mercedes-Benz dealership that is right there in Pittsburgh. And you can see, again, the columns in the background. And this is owned by Bobby Rall from his automotive group. And so it's exciting to see how Albert Kahn buildings and the Packard buildings have not just been preserved, they've been restored, they have new purposes, And, you know, we're just really excited to share some of what the Packard has done in other places and that those buildings are still around. I thank you for being here. We're going to have some questions and answers, but I also want to point out to you a couple gentlemen who are working on the Packard building downtown Detroit, trying to make some new purpose for that building without having it destroyed. And so they're in the back. You know, if anybody wants to meet them, we can introduce them. But we want to jump into questions and answers, and thank you for my rambling and my bad computer skills here.